Everyone, I'm really excited for today. We have another developer interview. We've been doing a lot of these. They were super fun to do in Infinite Summer, and we have another one. This game, the trailer proved extra popular on our channel. That's for ENENRA. It's a really cool Cyberpunk Ninja game. I'm really excited for it. It's exciting. A lot of our followers and fans are excited for it, just judging by people checking out the trailer. So we have the developer Zahid here with us today to talk about that game. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, hey everyone, I'm Zahid. I'm the sole developer of ENENRA. Um, with the game itself, so I've been working on the game for about a year and a half, touching about a year and 7 months now. And most of it was to learn how to use the engine, learn how to use Unreal Engine. And now it's got to a point where it's actually taken off, and I've now been developing my own combat systems and so on and so more. But that's the gist of how that game is what it is, and me.
You mentioned that it's on Unreal. Is it on 4 or 5?
It's still on 4, and I'm
4?
going
It's
to be
impressive for 4.
4's really good.
Yeah,
It's solid.
yeah, very solid.
I'm gonna move it to Unreal 5 very soon, actually,
Oh,
within the
really?
next week. Yeah,
We
I'm prepared.
I've talked about that briefly with some other developers in other interviews. What 5 being so new, a lot. You're not the first one to tell me that they switched from 4 to 5 and they made that
Yeah.
transition. And have you played around with 5 at all? What is alluring you to it? Like how is it? What do you feel like is going to benefit this game?
So I think the biggest benefit will be the lighting systems, Lumen and Nanite and everything, because I do want detailed worlds, and to be able to use something like Nanite, I think it'd be really useful because for example, I've been working on a level, putting a lot of meshes in there, so it's a high poly count, and I can reduce it as much as I can with the textures and the normal maps and everything. But having something like Nanite, which changes the polygons and the shapes at distance, way more useful. Um, so in terms of like optimization and lighting, I'll be going towards Unreal for that. I didn't go at first purely because there was a specific thing which I needed, which is like adjusting animations and keyframing stuff, but that's been added. I just didn't know how it was when Unreal first came out, but no, it's in there. So, I mean, I'd probably do it today.
So everything we've seen so far is running on 4, and the game already looks impressive. So it's really cool to hear that 5 is gonna, with 5 being relatively new and out for developers, that it's just only going to look better, and future
Yeah.
updates are going to enhance the game. Kind of translate a little bit of what you said. That's essentially is the simple layman's terms, is it's just going to look better, and that's something that gamers always resonate with. We love it when games look visually impressive, and that could be something that can really attract gamers to a game, especially if they're not familiar with it or anything. Is just that instant eye candy can definitely help with a game's. Other things are, of course, are important as well, but that immediate visual, it can be the biggest seller.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the name a little bit before we dive into the main questions. The game's called ENENRA. Can you elaborate? What is that? I was just like, that's a cool name. I verified pronunciation with you before we started, and I'm like, I don't know what that means. It sounds cool. So tell the viewers, what was the inspiration of that name? What does it mean? Where does it come from?
So what it means is it's a Japanese monster, a monster made out of shadows and smoke. So that description alone was pretty cool, and we thought, oh, that's pretty good. But the inspiration behind it was because the character is able to dodge, move around, and almost disappear. There's always trails behind him. He can dash and warp to different areas, almost like smoke. So I thought, okay, that makes sense. In terms of the character's name, it came about when I was chatting to one of my friends on the phone. This guy has great ideas, and I just said to him, I need a good name, and we just started listing off a bunch of random stuff, and it came to Japanese yokais, or monsters, folklore monsters. And then we both landed at ENENRA and thought, oh wow, this sounds good. It bounces off the tongue, ENENRA. It's like, yeah, that sounds good. I want that. But it also, there's a throwback in the story halfway through the game, which I don't want to spoil, but there's another character who's been prophesized to be this ENENRA character who has cursed abilities. Without spoiling too much. But that's it, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I would say picking a name for a project is sometimes can be one of the hardest things. It doesn't matter how much effort you put into a project or how hard the
Yeah.
project was. Sometimes naming something, I can empathize. I'm going through something similar where like we're preparing to launch our official like YouTube series. Like we're still going to do developers, and we have our long form gameplay segments, like our let's plays and stuff. We're launching like a YouTube series, like we're going to do like an ongoing. And like I've been going through like names, like what do I want to call it? Like I've had some boring ones. I have some ones that are less. I want it to be like related, so I can understand that. Like sometimes naming something you're excited about and working on and putting a lot of effort into, it can be hard. So I get that. But sometimes when you see that really cool name, you're just like, that's it. That's what it is. So I can understand that. Before we get into the lore, let's talk a little bit about just like the game itself. What type of game is it? So what type of genre? What inspired you guys what inspired you to build this type of game? Why did you go this route? So like genre and just like type of game. Tell us a little bit about it.
So it's a third-person hack and slash game. It's also a platformer because you can climb on a lot of stuff and whatnot. With the traversal system and the teleport traversal, you'll be able to climb throughout the world and dash around. So I'd consider it a platformer in that regard as well. But with hack and slash, the inspiration I got and why I wanted to make a hack and slash game was I used to enjoy games like Devil May Cry, and Metal Gear Rising was really good. And I think that was like 12 years ago when Metal Gear came out. I might be wrong. It might have been
an old game.
Yeah, but nobody did anything about it. They just left it. And I thought, man, I would really like to have something like this. So my initial thought was I'll just learn how to make a hack and slash game at a basic level. And then I started branching it out, and games that have really good systems, for example, Batman has a free flow system. And I thought that's not been done very often in hack and slash games. It's usually you focus on a single entity and then just go ham at that single enemy. So I've been trying to bridge this gap between a Devil May Cry style combat system and a Batman style free flow style combat system, so that you can attack multiple enemies at one point and then lock onto a single enemy and unlock all these other attacks. So when it comes to that kind of like in genre, I don't know if it is still classed as a hack and slash, but maybe also classed as a beat 'em up purely because of it's not purely just hack and slashing anymore. But I think as time goes on, I'll learn more about what kind of genre it'll be. The main focus for me is enemy AI, where I know a lot of hack and slash games is in a lot of videos I've shown, actually, the enemies don't really fight back very often. They can fight back, but they don't. So the next big focus will be making a bunch of enemies who actually challenge the player. I've made 3 boss enemies. When I spawned them all together, it was the only time I actually dashed away from the enemies and actually had to think, okay, I need to think about what I'm doing now, because they had different properties. So I don't want to make it just hack and slash as in button mash. I want the player to think and to actually have that rock, paper, scissors style kind of thought process.
Yeah, you mentioned 2 games that are just like really recognized for their unique and fun combat. You know, you mentioned the Devil May Cry series, which is very stylized and very chaotic, and there's a lot going on there. It's very vertical sometimes. Then you mentioned Batman, which is some of the earlier Batman games have some of the best like transitions between like enemy types. So you're like you said, you're not just like fighting one bad guy at a time and there just happens to be a group. You're kind of trying to like take on the trope of there's 10 guys and 9 of them are standing around cheering the one guy on that's fighting you, and if they all just attack like that trope of how video games with the protagonist versus like a small group of enemies, how they take turns, and that can be, there's gameplay reasons for that and you want the games to be fun, but like there's also like some immersion breaking to that, and like what would happen if like you want to give some challenge by making a character feel like a player feel like they're actually going up against 10 bad guys at once rather than just a group, and you're doing it one at a time. And that when that's implemented well, like the Batman games do, that can make really fun gameplay. So I'm really excited for that. You're definitely in some good company with what you're trying to achieve, and what
Yeah.
little we've seen of the game, and I'm sure even with when you go over to Unreal 5, that's going to even make maybe some of those things even easier to do, have more assets and more stuff happening at once. Let's talk a little bit about that. You mentioned the transition to Unreal 5. And how long? My next question will be: is how long has the game been in active development? Everything from maybe like conceptual stage to like pre-production to now, and how long has it been? How long have you been working on it?
About a year and 6 months, if that. It started in September 2020.
Yeah.
2020, yeah. So at the end of that year, basically, I started actually working on it. It started off as a first-person game,
Oh, really?
which you could like rewind time and stuff. Um, but then I got together with my friends and they told me, a third-person game is where it's at.
Yeah.
And I told them straight, it's hard, and I just came out of uni. I don't know how to do it. But they were just like, just go into it, push for it. So I actually have like all the videos from when I started up until now on my Instagram. I kept it as like a little journal where I would upload videos. So everything's visible from when I started to now, and all the changes I made and everything. So yeah, check that out.
Yeah, I actually kind of agree with that assessment. With there's definitely merits to both first person and third person's perspectives, but when I think of first person, I think it's really well fitted for the military shooter genre.
Yeah,
Like when it's the gunplay is the number one aspect of the gameplay, and maybe the character you're playing as isn't the most interesting thing to look at. Like I don't like it when I see games that have really interesting characters that you never see because it's first person. Like I
yeah,
was in that boat when I thoroughly disagreed with Cyberpunk 27's going first person, when they, because there was a point in its development when they were rattling around third person before they made big changes with CD Projekt Red, and a lot of people were like, why are you doing like third person? And they had this really intricate character creator that was completely wasted because all you ever saw the character was in maybe like photo mode or blurry mirrors. And like, so like when you have really interesting characters that are very
yeah,
visually interesting, or especially I think when it's melee and punching combat, like
yeah,
games, there are some games out there that it's melee and like like that type of combat, and I just don't think it works in first person. I'm not saying you can't
yeah,
make it work, but I just don't like it as much. Like I think that was a
yeah,
smart decision to go. And it also, I think it helps players connect with the character because they're going to be seeing the character at all times.
yeah.
Uh, so I think third person's a definitely a cool way to go for any type of melee or any type of hand-to-hand combat type of gameplay. Nothing against first-person shooters. I've played a lot of
No,
first-person shooters. I've put thousands of hours into Overwatch and Apex, but like that works for that. But like with
yeah,
certain types of games, I feel like third person is the way it needs to be. Um, the
I
time
agree.
travel mechanics are cool though. If that was an early design, that could be something that could come back in the future. Any type of time travel or any type of time manipulation is always is a cool thing. So that's kind of an
There,
interesting little piece
there
there.
is some time travel, but I say there's time manipulation powers. I've redone the whole stasis sword. There's a few things you can hold down the teleport mechanic and it slows down time.
Okay.
And I never put that out there like, oh, you can do this in the tutorial. People found it out by holding the button and looking around for teleport points. I was like, oh, they figured it out. There's another one where you can throw a sword and it embeds into the enemy and it slows that enemy down. So I made an enemy type which dodges everything on the ground. And there's two ways to kill her, where you can throw the sword and it'll slow her down so you can actually attack her, or you can launch her into the air. But those two are fairly simple. There's going to be time travel, but it's going to be tied to the story. So with like time rewinding and stuff like that, I don't think I'm going to be adding that kind of Prince of Persia time travel into the game. That's a little complex for me.
Honestly, any type of time manipulation in a game is something that I'm always like, I love it. Anytime you can like slow down, rewind, alter
Yeah,
anything, whether it's like story based or gameplay based, I'm always down for that. I can never get enough time travel in my games. Is one of my favorite like science fiction tropes and gameplay mechanics and narrative mechanics in games. So that's really cool. I'm excited to hear about that. I liked the part you mentioned about the like when with the teleport, you hold it down, it kind of
Yeah.
pauses around you. You can look around for teleport points. That's a cool part because it kind of actually reminds me a little bit of one of my favorite mechanics in one of my favorite all-time games. And so in Mass Effect and also in
Yeah.
the Final Fantasy VII
Oh
remake,
yeah.
there's this approach that some games, and it actually kind of sounds a little bit like what you're doing, where you can have kind of like a soft pause to look
Yeah.
around and strategize in a real-time game. So like I'm not a huge fan of turn-based games. I always like real-time games, but that's a really cool way. It's a hybrid mechanic, and that's why they did it for Final Fantasy VII remake, was to bring some of the strategy from turn-based to
Okay.
a
Yeah.
real-time game, because that's what the original was. And so anytime that you're playing a real-time game where you're fighting in real time, anything, you get that kind of that soft pause that you can look around and strategize a little bit. That's a really cool mechanic because I like that. I think it's the perfect hybrid. And it sounds like that's what
Yeah.
you're describing. So like I'm really excited about that feature. I think that's really cool. Where like you have this really fast-paced combat, and in the moment you can like hold down the teleport and like look around and just kind of get a sense of your situation a little bit. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. I like
The
that.
idea was that you would hold the button, and once you let go, you would go to teleport to the point you were targeting, essentially.
Mhm.
So that was the idea. It's like slow down, look around, teleport away from attacks or whatever. But I will I'll work on it and amplify it further.
Oh, it's awesome. I like what you're describing. That's that type of in the moment kind of situational awareness. Any type
Yeah.
of like pause that you could do in real time and like not be just a pause screen. Like you could actually
Yeah.
like get a sense of what's going on in the moment. Um, I've even like kind of cheated with photo modes to give me that, like in the moment where like I'm in the combat
Yeah.
photo mode, because I just want to like, okay, what's going on? I need to get situational awareness. So
That's
like
pretty smart.
I know that's not what photo modes are for, but I've used them that way sometimes. But
I never would have thought anybody would have used them for that, but that's smart.
okay, confession time. My worst cheat with a photo mode was I used the photo mode to look around a corner because I wanted to see what was over there.
That's
um,
pretty smart.
yeah, it's like
That is pretty smart.
it's like the third person hack taken out to the extreme of like, there's no way my character could see this, but I'm going to use the photo mode to go as far as I can to so like it's kind of cheating, but it's also kind of like, I don't know, I like being able to get a sense of my surroundings when there's a
Yeah.
lot of things going on or really chaotic combat.
I'm gonna have to add
So
photo mode in my game now.
oh, you definitely need photo mode.
I'm gonna have to.
All games need photo modes, especially when they're really. I hate it when a game launches that's just gorgeous and has no photo mode. It was so rough.
Yeah.
Like I remember playing. I played through God of War and Final Fantasy VII, and they're both beautiful games. Neither of which launched with photo modes, and they waited until I'd already beaten the games to add the thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I've taken a million photos, and I like it's so much better the photo mode. But yes, definitely need to add that. That'd be really cool. Um, let's dive into the game a little bit more. We know what type of game it is. We know it's a third person hack and slash. I kind of briefly mentioned it's like a Cyberpunk Ninja game, but like let's hear from you. I mean, what we're going to be having do for this video, for those of you watching that you've already seen this, is that we're going to have like gameplay and content from the trailer up at the back. So you're going to see some stuff behind us throughout this conversation, but would love to still hear what are some of the things about the lore and the characters. So like we know what type of game from a gameplay perspective, but what can you tell us about the lore, the story, the premise, and even the main character? Like what can you tell us about those things?
So I've been rewriting the story to get up to this point where I can actually talk about it, but I haven't spoke about it up until this point. This is probably the first time I'll mention it. But the main character is meant to be like, he's part of a family, and this family is his older brother and his dad. They're all part of this organization called Ronin Industries, which is like a mercenary organization. But they're so powerful, and that the military, everyone in future Japan uses them. So they have a lot of control, and that's the general premise. But your character is the youngest sibling, so he's very sarcastic and very, how can I put it, like inexperienced. So he makes a lot of silly jokes all the time. But because he's like hiding behind his elder brother's shadow, because his elder brother is way more experienced, it's like a defense mechanism. So it's pretty, it'll make sense for a few people in that regard. But the premise is that an assassination mission goes wrong, and your character is involved in ENENRA, and it starts a giant story wormhole between him and his brother. But I don't want to spoil more than that. But there's going to be 6 other characters who are part of this mercenary corporation who will eventually become bosses some way or another. So there's going to be a variety of different bosses as well. And it's going to be set across 2 timelines. So you will go back and forth between the 2. And a lot of story will be presented through flashbacks in gameplay. So that's one thing I'm trying to do, which is very unique. The best way I can explain it is in Titanfall 2, when you go back in time and then come back in time. But that would be happening during a fight in live time, to give story, for example. That's going to be really hard to do, but I'm going to try my hardest to make it work.
Okay. We need to pause right there because you just referenced what is, in my opinion, one of the greatest like single player missions of like the last 10 years.
Yeah,
like I have lauded that mission. I've talked about it. Like there are still people who haven't played. I've referenced that situation multiple times of like, I'm still mad at EA for effing up the launch of Titanfall 2 and like shooting them in the foot, because that was a phenomenal game. And that game was incredible, and it was largely incredible not just because of the great story overall, the great interactions with BT and the robot, and also the multiplayer was really, I mean, everything about that game was 10 out of 10. But that one mission is something that we're still talking about years later. So I love that you just brought that up, because like you just brought up one of my favorite missions of all time.
That's great.
I've said before on multiple occasions that if someone can build a game that incorporates that type of mechanic, because it is one of the coolest mechanics I've ever played. The idea of existing and having 2 different time periods coexisting, and it wasn't just the story mechanic. They use that in combat where like you're fighting 2 different sets of enemies in 2 different time periods, and you're relocating, and like you had to like time when you're healing stuff and jumping back and forth. Like you'd be in one timeline fighting like soldiers, and then you'd hop in another timeline, and you'd have to keep track of like where the 2 different enemy types were in the different time. And they also used it for some like traversal too, like where like I remember this one part where like you're falling down a pit and you had to flip back and forth between the 2 time periods multiple times, because in one time period the fan was still there and it would kill you, but in the other it was gone and broken, and you had to do that like 3 or 4 times. If you can pull off literally anything close to that in this game,
I'm going
10 out
to
of
try.
10, man. 10 out of 10, man. Like that would be phenomenal. Like any type of dual reality system like that, whether you pull it off in just like a story, or if you could achieve like a gameplay element of that, like no matter how big or small, if you just get that in there in some way, that'd be phenomenal. Like I'm going to
try. I'm going to try. It's going to be mainly during like a specific big fights where flashbacks and story matters, but I want to make it so it's live gameplay, not a cutscene, so it happens while you're playing the game.
My excitement level for this game is just shooting through the roof. You're mentioning 2 of like my all-time favorite game mechanics, the previous one, the real-time pause, and this one. Like you're mentioning some like really cool company, man. Like this could be like, I'm excited. I'm like, I mean, I was excited before, but like now I'm like extra excited. Like
I'm trying to pull off a lot of AAA mechanics on my own.
Sick.
So it's pretty mad. The combat's basically done, so that's ready to go. So it's all the fun extra stuff I want to add in.
No, I'm excited for that. That's really sick. You got time travel. You got the dual reality system for Titanfall 2 in some way. You got the real time pause from like Final Fantasy. Man, you got some cool stuff that you're trying to pull off.
I added the basic slicing in Metal Gear Rising, where you could just slice pillars and stuff. That's something I recently added.
That's cool.
That's in there now. That's ready to go. It's just I don't know. It's not a core gameplay mechanic. It's just something for fun that happens when you're in the middle of a fight.
Being able to just like environmental damage, especially with a sword, is just that's always fun. Just being able to actually like have the world feel like it's reacting to what you're doing. Let's talk about that. We talk about some of these. You're trying to pull off some really impressive AAA mechanics that I've seen in like maybe like 1 or 2 games each, and you're trying to pull them all off. And these are like really cool. Like And also just in general, like all those cool mechanics aside, just the game's visually, very beautiful and pretty, and just visually it's enticing. My question is it looks great. You're describing some complex and impressive mechanics. How can you pull off AAA graphics and mechanics in an indie game? Like I've talked to other developers who are also pulling off some really impressive game, and you're a solo developer, so like, what is? I would phrase it like, how do you do that? Like, when you have other developers who are maybe building games, what is your advice to them that it is possible to pull off these types of games with the manpower of one, and maybe with the indie type of budgets? Like, how are you pulling off these complex and impressive things? What tools or tricks or strategies are you using to do the work of 10, essentially?
So the Unreal Marketplace is a gold mine, and that's basically a marketplace which has all these different assets you can buy. For example, I can't model to save my life, so I buy a lot of models or environment models, but I do try as much as I can to change much because Unreal allows you to change some texture stuff inside. So you can get assets and change them up to look however you want them to look, but that saves like hundreds of hours of work. Because even if you're a solo developer and you're an indie developer, to make each and everything, it's very demanding. I'm not at that level. I can't model. So, for example, character models can't do that either. When it comes to mechanics, though, that's something I have a lot of experience in. I would say learning absolutely everything you possibly can, regardless of genre of type of game. When I started, I wanted to learn as much as possible. My main focus was how I manipulate animations and make them my own, and then add things and add systems and then different mechanics, how we get characters moving around the map and how we get enemies reacting to attacks, for example. I would say going through as many tutorials online to learn as much as possible. Like, even if it's a first-person game or even a racing game, there's always something somewhere which you can pull out and extract and use in your own game. And I've noticed, like, in other games, they have great ideas for using mechanics. One example would be like figuring out the velocity of the car that you're driving. And I thought, oh, that's great. I should think about that. I should use that and work out the velocity of the character. My character's moving in my own game. Completely different genre, but a great piece of advice that I saw was like, different genres have something that you can use regardless of what it is. But yeah, the marketplace is a great place to start to get assets to look good. The one thing that changes everything is learning to use post-process and lighting. And I learned this with the help of guys like Ace and AI Code and Steven making Soda Symphony. These guys, we came together and we sat down, we started going through these things. There's a lot of tutorials on like how you can light up a scene, what you can do with post-processing. It changes everything. It makes the most basic looking game look super dark and very AAA. And then learning how to use reflections. It's crazy. Reflections make a AAA game look AAA. It's just reflections and ray tracing.
I like that, because it's amazing how much of some of the more cinematic nature of things is just boiling down to the right lens flares and reflections on like puddles on the ground, and just like these little details can make, if you can put two games side by side that it's more flat versus all those things, and that can give the AAA effect to a game. And you're absolutely right. I really like the focus on the mechanics, because I think a lot of things are important in what makes people talk about a game, what increases word of mouth, what makes us talk about them years later. I mean, great stories, great characters, just X factors, unique things. But I think mechanics are one of the things that can give a game the most legs. Like, here we are talking about Titanfall 2 and Mass Effect, and like we're talking about games that were made a long time ago on a mechanic. Like, mechanics stick with gamers. Like, that could be something that, like, 5 years after playing it, we're like, you remember that one game that did that one random specific thing? Like, it's not that we don't remember characters or stories or anything, but like mechanics, they're just they stick. They're sticky, and like there's things that we just continue to talk about, like that weird or cool thing. And even when like stories fade, or characters fade, like I remember mechanics in a game longer than anything else. Like I don't remember, like kind of a random example, but like Black Ops 3 was a long time ago. I don't remember a thing about the story. I really don't. I don't remember the story at all. I couldn't tell you what happened. I don't remember anything about it, but I remember there was a particular sniper rifle in that game that mechanically worked a little bit different than other sniper rifles that I'd played, and I just really enjoyed it, and I like played with it the whole game. And I remember the gun. I remember the mechanic of how they made that sniper rifle work. I don't even remember the story. I'm not saying the story was bad. It maybe not super memorable, but I remember that mechanic longer. And maybe on a more indie example, like there's a game that I waited almost 7 years for this game. It was our indie pick of the year 2 years ago or last year, called Superliminal. I saw that game has a really cool mechanic that's just
amazing,
weird and cool and fun. It has a great story visually. It's very beautiful game.
Yeah.
But like, I'm going to remember that mechanic for a long time. I've referenced it multiple times in conversations. And like, I saw the tech demo for the concept like 7 years before release. And I was like one of like the few people who saw it, and I was really excited. I waited 7 years because that mechanic was cool. Yeah. And so like, I think mechanics and just like focusing on making really cool and unique mechanics is a really smart strategy, because it can make your game stand out amongst other games that are visually impressive or also maybe have cool characters and stories. Is mechanics can be unique, and uniqueness is hard things to pull off in games because thousands of games come out every month. So uniqueness can be achieved in mechanics. So it is really cool to hear that focus and how you're able to pull off AAA between the reflections and the mechanics. So I want to circle back to the lore a little bit. We know a little bit more about it, but I'd like to learn as much as we can. Is it taking place in like a near Earth future? Is it a different world entirely? Is it on Earth? Is it not on Earth? What type? Is it an alternate reality? Is it just a far future? Like, what type of world are we dealing with here?
It's just on Earth. Okay. It's set in future Japan.
Future Japan.
So it starts off in future Japan. But yeah, it's not on any. There's no sci-fi or spacecrafty kind of settings or anything. Not in this game, but maybe the next one.
No, it doesn't have to be like an alternate reality, but I like to know settings. Like, I like to know where things are happening, and like, what about like, are these characters, they're like cyberpunk, so they're like kind of like cybernetic? Are they androids? There's definitely some technology going on with some of these characters. Can you tell us a little bit more about like, what are they? Who are they? How did they get that way? Is everyone like that? Are they special?
So because this Marine Corps, mercenary corps, this mercenary corps have multiple enemies. Multiple members. They will all have like different looks and different AI essentially when you fight them. There is one enemy which I'm looking really forward to actually get started on. It's going to be like a duel. How can I put this? It's going to be like an enemy which shares half an AI with another enemy. So it's two enemies you fight, but one will be mostly programmed to try and get you into the air, like uppercut you or get you into the air, and the other enemy will be programmed to try and slam you back down to the other guy. They'll share the same kind of fight. They'll share the same fight as well with you. So imagine it's like a 2v1 fight with one of them, which I'm looking really forward to getting, because I think it'll be really sick to see how they behave. There's primarily like blocking enemies who block, parry. There's dodging enemies. There's going to be enemies which will have their own type of powers as well, because obviously there's the main character has like his blink teleport abilities. His brother and their dad shared those abilities, but in this world a lot of people have these kind of abilities, so you'll be fighting a lot of characters who will eventually, like similar to in Cyberpunk, there was that one enemy that would teleport side to side and then come and attack you. Or there was one ability I saw which I thought was really cool. It was in Infamous Second Son. I think it's called Neon, and that just looked sick. It was just like you would zap around using electricity or neon gas, I think. I haven't gotten around to naming all these characters yet. It's just we've wrote out the story and the boss fights themselves, but not their names or what they specialize in just yet. There is one character, the female boss, who's been in the game, Hanaya, and she's one of the people who teach the main character how to fight in the tutorial and all sorts. So she'll be very involved in story. Um, and then the main elder brother, who's going to be there's going to be various few fights with him, so it'll be pretty fun. But the main characters, there's a lot of spoilers in the stuff, so I feel like if I go into it, it'll spoil a lot.
I can see where you're like trying to like edit as you talk.
Yeah.
So like I want to leave this out, and I can say this. Like I can see it. I can see it. I pulled up the press kit because I wanted to just ask about some of these characters. So the main like title, like the main promo image has the guy, he has the white hair, is the green like ninja suit going on. I'm assuming he's the protagonist, correct?
Yeah, that's the main character you play.
Does he have a name yet?
ENENRA, yeah.
And so he's ENENRA. Okay,
so that's him, yeah.
I got you. Because there's another character in the story that is like also claims to be ENENRA, but he's ENENRA. Okay, I got you. And then
his brother's name is Yusuna.
Okay.
So I made them very. I think the direct translation was excellent, but I think I changed it up or something.
Then we got another image with this girl walking away. She has like two ninja swords, long blonde hair. Who is that? Yeah. And like, is she like one of the support characters? Is she an enemy?
So that's the enemy that dodges a lot of attacks. There's a recent video I put up where she dodges almost every ground attack. She zaps about and everything. She's just a dodging enemy, just an enemy that you can fight, like not fodder, a little bit more difficult, but
she's pretty badass looking.
She looked cool, so I thought, she deserves.
It's a really cool badass design. There's also another image which it looks like it's from kind of like a third person perspective of ENENRA, where you just get like a sense of the world, and you get to see his like green glowing light on them, and there's like enemies off in the distance. That's a really cool shot.
That was on top of the skyscraper. Yeah.
I like the looking at another one of these, just like some of the like the neon colors in the background of the city and stuff. There's one that looks like a subway underground with like, it has like very like Blade Runner vibes with like just like the dark but neon lit city a little bit. I like dark cyberpunk like that, where like it's a really cool vibe that you have going on. It's in good company.
I tried to make that as detailed as I possibly could to see how far I could push the engine itself and see how it would run. But luckily, that image itself, that setting ran amazingly, because most of like the graffiti and most of the images and the meshes are very low res, so it was really easy.
No, it looks really great. I'm definitely going to be having some of this stuff up behind us when in the final video for those of you watching. But yeah, I just want to pull up the press kit and look at some of those images because it gives a little bit kind of a visual telling of the story and what's going on. Got some really cool character designs. I think the enemy character design you have and ENENRA both look really cool. Let's fast forward a little bit. So we know like what, some of the past of what's gone into the development with some of the lore and story. Like let's live with the future a little bit. Like what can you tell us like about your roadmap? Like what are your plans for release? Do you have anything between now and release? Is there going to be an early access, a demo, a beta period, anything like that? What can you tell us about the roadmap?
So right now there's a build to play and it's available. It's on itch, but that's got the first intro level, and it's got a practice mode which you can practice everything in, and a wave mode. So that's just for everyone to try the combat system and see how it feels. It's been really positive with that. A lot of people have enjoyed it, and I'm pretty happy. But I would also advise people to do that as indie developers, to get people to test your game ASAP, because they find everything that you wouldn't know, because a new set of eyes, a new experience, they can give you good advice.
Absolutely. I wouldn't just limit that advice to indie. I would limit that to, I would bring that to all game developers alike. If anything, the last few years have taught us, AAA needs to start testing their games more. And like at a point in time when it's still like the amount of developers that like do a beta like a week before or a test like a couple days early, it's like you can't fix anything by then. This is not even helpful. Like, yeah, you're absolutely right.
I think it should happen when there's a new mechanic involved or something that's coming that you think, oh, this could break stuff that people have at it. People are excited, so why not? That's the way I see it. It's like, it's very appreciated. So, and it's free, so fun. So there's going to be 4 chapters, and there's going to be 8 acts in each. 4 acts in each chapter. So in total, there's about 12 levels, and I'm aiming for them to be like around half an hour each. So about a 6-hour game, if my maths is right, 6 to 7 hours, depending on the player. There was a whole bunch of levels I made in all the updates I've put out, but a lot of those levels that I made, I won't be actually using them anymore because the story was rewritten. I'm now making it from ground up. So mechanics are all done. Most of the AI is done. It'll be really simple to add a new AI system. It's just now building the level and adding cutscenes. So from now till launch, it's just making the levels, making the story. So I'm at a good point. I'm at a very good point now with that. It's just literally hammering it out and getting it actually done. There are going to be new mechanics I'm going to add, but that's going to be very situational and based on the story. At what point at this point this mechanic needs to be made, I'll make it then.
So between what we talked about, it sounds like we're gonna have an engine upgrade. We're redoing several of the maps. So it sounds like there's still a good amount of work to be done. Are we shooting for like 2023 or for like we have a demo now, but like for like maybe like an early access build or a publicly available like full length story game, whether that's early access or a final version. When do you have like a launch window involved that you're trying to shoot for that you could share?
It was originally that I actually said it would be done by November this year, which won't happen.
Yeah.
So I'm going to about mid 2023, about mid time. The plan is just to get as much as I possibly can do now.
Yeah.
So yeah, about mid next year.
Yeah, I think
to have it properly polished.
Yeah, November would probably be difficult to pull off with what you're describing. Like you're describing some very impressive mechanics that I'm excited for. Yeah. Plus, you're doing an engine upgrade. Plus, we're adding in maps and cutscenes and things. So it's still very much in development. So I think I speak for all of us who are excited for the game that I think everything you're describing, I'd much rather wait for that than get something else in November. Because like what we've seen so far looks fun, but everything you're describing could be a really phenomenal experience. And I'm sure it will be. So I think I speak for all gamers when I say, take as long as you need. We're excited. I just have to ask that question of like, when can we play it? But I like take as much time as you need because everything you're describing, like, I think that's going to be, that's going to be worth it. So I'm really excited for that. I want to say thank you for taking time out of your busy development to talk with Game Infinite. Tell us a little bit about the game. I know I speak for the rest of us when I say that we're all really excited for ENENRA. It looks really cool. And I'm looking for, so for those of you watching, stay tuned for, of course, more indie content. We're bringing more trailers, more interviews. And then as updates and news comes up for ENENRA, of course, I'm going to be right there knocking on his Twitter DMs, bugging him for more info and more news. So thank you, sir, for stopping by our interview. And
thank you.
I want to thank you, for time for this and for interviewing with us. For those of you watching, we'll see you next time on the next Game Infinite video.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up, it's time to look at the enemy.